Well, first of all, thank you for this invitation to the Living City Forum. I'm very happy and pleased to be sharing my work today with an audience. I am here in Dhaka, Bangladesh, in my office. And it's right next to a very busy street. So once in a while, you'll hear the city, and in a way that gives you a bit of a context for where we are located. So Marina Tabassum Architects, that's my office, and I started this practice since 2005. But in the recent years, let's say in the last 3 or 4 years, we've been focusing on a different kind of work, which I would like to probably focus on today more, or at the beginning of my presentation, which is also to do with the foundation that we have created, Foundation for Architecture and Community Equity. And so I'll talk about the architecture of transition, which is in many ways one of my concerns nowadays. In practice, and also while I'm teaching and educating my students in different universities where I teach. And so it's about displacement in many ways. Displacement is one of the major challenges of our 21st century, as we can see that there are forced migration that's happening due to war and conflict, genocide. At the very moment when we speak, or I'm speaking, there is a war going on, not at least one, but 2 wars, and people are being forcefully and mass displacements are occurring while genocide is in progress. And at the same time, the climate crisis has also brought us to a point of extreme geographical and climatic conditions where people are also being displaced for many reasons. So it's an old data, but 90 million people are facing displacement. And as architects, my question or my concern has always, in the last few years, have been, do we have a responsibility towards that? How can we, as a profession, make ourselves available to these concerns and crises that are plaguing our world? And in many ways, where I live, where I practice, where I'm from, Bangladesh is a country which actually faces both these crises. One is the cross-border displacement, and the other one is the climate-induced internal displacement. And I will talk about both and how we are trying to make ourselves available or our practice trying to address these issues. So Bangladesh, as you can see here, I generally like to give a background of the geoformation because that has a lot to do with the way the whole the context and culture behaves. So it's a land that was formed by the water hydrological system coming down from the Himalayan range. And there are 2 major rivers. One is the Ganges, and the other one is the Brahmaputra, and the other one is Meghna. So these 3 rivers are flowing out of the Himalayan range, and it flushes down into the Bay of Bengal. And over centuries, this has accumulated a large amount of silt, and this accumulation of silt has actually created what is known as the Gangetic Delta or the Ganges Delta. It's a progradation of the landmass. And this Ganges Delta is Bangladesh's 1/3 landmass. And so this is a very fluid landscape. As you can see in this image here, this is a 20-year data of movement of the river Padma. And you can see how the river changes its course. And as it changes its course, it's eroding the land and also creating sandbeds in the middle of the river. So it's a constant play of erosion and emergence of land. And this has shaped the way people live in this land. So if you look closely, even at the ground level, during the monsoon season, when the glacial melt coming down from the Himalayas is extreme, and also the rainfall causes an enormous amount of current in these rivers while they're flowing to the Bay of Bengal. And it takes away or erodes these very fragile, soft soil on which the cities and the villages are built. So here you can see we have lost many of these small villages, and people have lost their home and life. And with the climate crisis, as the glacial melt is increasing, this has become a major crisis also, because it has increased flooding, it has increased the erosion of landmass. And so these are some images that you can see where people have become homeless, landless, and they had to be displaced from their own location, looking for a place to stay. And for people who are actually do not have land anymore, who become landless entirely, for them, the sandbeds actually becomes a place of refuge. This is where they go and start to live. But these sandbeds are transitory. They are in the middle of the river. At times they settle down and become a livable space. But in most cases, these are very transitory sediments that at one point washes away. So this has their own life and ecology. And we did some study in 2019 looking into the sandbeds and how people live there and how this whole formation starts. So, until and unless a sandbed has been in existence for 4 years or more, one cannot claim that this will become a settled land. And so after 8 years of its existence, then only people go and start to habit or claim their ground, especially government and all the other agencies. But these 8 years of time, when nobody is really noticing what's happening in terms of ecology in these sandbeds, the landless people find refuge and they start living there. They start to cultivate this land, and a lot of different kind of forms of nature starts to also evolve in these areas. And if you look into these areas where we have this land movement, where this land erosion happens, especially the banks of the rivers erode, starting from the Brahmaputra to the Ganges, and also going down to the Bay of Bengal in the Meghna rivers, there is a certain vernacular house form, which is made with wooden frame and corrugated sheet facades. And these are flat pack systems built locally, and you can actually buy these systems in local markets. And these are the house form that has existed for more than 200 years, almost 300 years. And so this is a vernacular house form, which is absolutely flat pack system. And if you look here in the marketplace where they generally build it, people actually buy these houses. And the best part of this is that when land starts to erode away, people take their houses down and they move it to a different location. So it's a mobile system, a sort of a modular also, but each of these houses cost about between $2,000 to, let's say, $6,000. And for landless people who are living in the sandbeds, for them, this is an unaffordable way of living. So this is one of the houses which we took to Sharjah during the Sharjah Architecture Triennial, where we showcased our research. And we bought 3 of these houses from the local market, and we took it to Sharjah, which at the moment now also still standing there in Sharjah. And this was done in 2019. And then basically, so this is the house, as you can see. This is in Sharjah, where we were given a small courtyard where we actually placed the houses. And they're beautiful structures. intricate work of beautifully curved out wooden frame and everything. So they're really beautiful structures by themselves. But this is how people generally live in the sandbeds, as you can see here. They source material locally, like these tall grass, a haystack, maybe a few bamboo from the mainland, and some corrugated sheet. So when COVID struck in 2020, and our life kind of came to a halt, a lot of questions came about since the crisis happened. Our overconsumption, our extraction of resources from the world, and the imbalance that we have created, the climate crisis and everything. And at the same time, while we were battling this COVID pandemic, there was not much work in the office. So at that time, we decided to work further with this idea of a mobile system which can actually be helpful for the landless communities. And the other reason is because Bangladesh is also a country which is facing climate crisis. We have sea level rise that's already happening in the southern part, especially in the coastal areas. We have unpredictable rainfall, and the flooding situations have also aggravated. Cyclones, we had 2 cyclones this year. So, these are unprecedented in our lifetime, or even before that. So, this is a time when we need to really focus on people who has never contributed to this whole crisis, people who have zero carbon footprint. And as a profession or professionals who are involved in a industry which actually contributes a huge amount of carbon footprint, we feel that there is a contribution that has to come from us. So, so this is our little intervention, let's say, that started in 2020 during the COVID pandemic, where we in the office started to look into these different forms of smaller modular structures that could be easily built, easily dismantled, can be sourced locally in terms of material, and can be affordable for the local population who has very minimal income. They're almost ultra low income people living off the land in many ways. And so this is a structural system that we came up with using bamboo, which is a local material, and some steel joints or connectors that creates this space frame structure, which is quite sturdy on its own and can sit on the ground with a very minimal footing. And we used corrugated sheet as a roofing material so that it could be easily dismantled and taken away. And basically, the walls and the floor could be anything that people can find in that location. And so the first structure that we built was during the pandemic. And these are some of the illustrations that we thought of could happen. It could be a small community of people living together. And since the structure had 2 levels, it could actually be useful during the flooding season when people could actually take refuge on the upper level while the houses are in flood. So these are some of our illustrations during that time. And the idea was, we call it Khudi Bari, Khudi meaning small and Bari is a house. So this Khudi Bari is a sort of an intervention into the vernacular. We didn't want the building to look too much of an alien. We wanted it to sort of blend into the landscape, the way people generally live their lives, and also to involve the community for whom we are building. So it's a process that we had to develop. So this is a first structure that we built in 2020, sometime in March, April. 2 of the architects from the office actually went and built it in Dhaka. And we tried it out, tested it out to see if it really works and if it has enough space for a small family, maybe a family, a husband, wife, and a child could live in it. And this could be scaled up. So that was also another concern. So After the first module, we decided to take it to the sandbeds where we did our initial research. And that's actually in the middle of the Meghna River, in the lower Meghna River, close to the Bay of Bengal. And so to go there, it's quite a ride, actually. From Dhaka, you need to take a boat, which looks like in the one in the middle. And then it's a night's journey. And then after that, when you get to the mainland, you need to take another boat, a smaller one, to go to the middle of the river where you see these sandbeds. And in the sandbeds, actually, is where people are living. So one such community with whom we work. So this is a sandbed, as you can see, 2 sandbeds. And the main river you can see in the horizon. I don't know if my cursor is visible, but at the horizon, you can see a small boat also going towards Dhaka from Bay of Bengal. And these sandbeds, after 4 years of time, becomes quite fertile and cultivable. So the landless people actually uses this land to grow different kind of vegetables and fruits, which can be grown in sands. And so a large amount of people move to these areas. And so some of the houses that we built here, working with the community. So this was the first house we built for a very young family, with a toilet, as you can see here. And the idea was to actually find out what it really requires to go to a place like this, where there is nothing, there is no running water, no electricity. Yeah, it's absolutely cut off from any kind of artificial means of what we generally live with in the cities. So basically, the team, which was actually a few architects, engineer, craftsmen from our office, went there as they basically camped and then built these structures. So we built about 4 houses. We did a few which were 2 modules. We did 1 module, so different type of modules depending on the family structure and the number of people who are living there. And if you look at it, it's basically bamboo, structural bamboo, and then connected with steel connectors, and basically just very easy to assemble and disassemble at the same time as you just take it off. And we use, in this particular area, there are these tall grass that grows in the land, in the sandbeds. So we just use that sandbed, this tall grass, as generally people, the community uses to make the facades. And here you can see the details of that, basically, whatever we could find in the location. The only thing that we brought in were the bamboo and the steel connectors. The rest of it was sourced locally. And so once we built these houses in the lower Meghna, we were able to secure some grant from the Swiss Development Corporation. And with that grant, we started to build almost about 100 houses in different locations, geographical locations in Bangladesh. And so our team works. We are also looking into different kind of materials based on where we are building. And the community takes part. And that's the most important aspect of this project, is that the community must learn how to build it, because it's about knowledge sharing. It's also about understanding how this whole system works, so that when it's time for them to relocate their house, as they do not own the land, and they quite often have to move either because of the land movement or because of their lack of land ownership, and so that they can actually take the house and move from that location to a different location. And so we've been building these houses in different places. As you can see here, we've been able to actually create small communities, and we are monitoring also to see how they act and behave. And as I said, that we didn't want to make it look too much, anything different from what they're generally used to in terms of vernacular houses. the inner space where on the upper level. And so the community engagement, the working with community is a major factor for us. And so that's how it's been going on. So this is one of the locations where right next to the Indian border, where we have this large ground, which is actually water retention areas. And the water that comes from the monsoon season, from the highest rainfall area in the world, which is Cherrapunji, all the water comes down and gets collected in Bangladesh. So that same area during the monsoon season becomes this area of water retention. So as you know, Bangladesh hosts about 1 million displaced population from the Myanmar. And these refugees, when they crossed border from the Rakhine state, where they are originally from, and they are now living in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. And we have about 1 million people living in a very dense situation, as you see here. And you know, in 2021, World Food Program actually invited us to design a few of their structures, almost 8 different kind of projects that we did with them. And during that time, the idea was if we could really use this idea of Kutibari structure to build something in the refugee camps. Refugee camps are, as you know, always made out of temporary materials, because the idea is that they will be repatriated, they will go back to their own country. And so the only material that are allowed in these refugee settlements are bamboo and tarpaulin sheets in case of Bangladesh. And so since Kudibari uses bamboo, we thought this could be an opportunity also for us to see if this could have a much more scalable way of building something. So this is the refugee camp in plan. The dark black spots are actually refugee settlements. And this was from 2017. This exodus of refugees came to Bangladesh while they were facing genocide and ethnic cleansing. And so now for 5 years, they've been living here. And this used to be a forest land, which had to be, turned into a settlement by cutting down trees. And so some of our work also is about reforestation and also building women's safe spaces, because gender-based violence is quite a crisis, especially in a dense situation in the camps. And so one of the ideas when we started our work in 2021 was to first create a knowledge base of how to build, so that we can actually create a population or the local people become more knowledgeable about the system. So we work together in different kind of community engagements and kind of shared knowledge of ours. Right outside the campground where people are staying in Ukhia and Cox's Bazar, we built a house for our own selves. And this is also a Kudibari structure. The idea was, if we are giving people houses to live in, we should try out one for ourselves also. So this is a 3-module Kudibari that we built for us to stay right outside the camp. And so whenever our team went there during the time of our work, this is the house where we all shared and stayed in. The lower level was the place where we generally came together, we worked, we discussed things, and the upper level was where we actually sleep at night. So we had two sides. One was for the girls, the other one was for the boys, and the central space was more like an atrium. Here you can see the upper level where we had the bed set up. So, at times we had about 12 people living in this house in a cramped situation where we had architects, engineers, community architects, landscape architects, carpenters, and work, our craftspeople who were all sharing the same house together. So one of the projects that we did in the refugee camp was building a women-friendly center, a women's community center. And this was burned down. This was in Camp 9, burned down during one of the devastating fires. And fire is a regular occurrence in these dense settlements. And so our first idea is always to work on the program. And the way we develop the program is we work with the refugees themselves. And so we work on trying to understand what their needs are, what would it be that they would like to have in the centers, especially it's being women's space. So we start designing the houses or the building with the women who would be occupying them in a way to bring them into the whole conversation and to give them a sense of ownership. And the plan and the model that you see that these women are actually building are quite beautifully built. And one major thing that stands out is the courtyard or the garden. And this is their only thing that they have asked for, that we want a garden, because in their houses in Myanmar, they've always had a garden, and all of them talked about their garden and the plants that they had. And so we thought that the small piece of land that we had, this would be, a Kudibari idea where we have 2 stories or 2 floors, can actually save some of the land, and we can create a sizable garden for the women to grow different kind of food if they like. So that's how the plan is. So we have a very small land. So we have 3 modules structure, in fact 4 modules. On one side we have women, and then once you enter, there's one side for the men also, and one side for the women. The toilets and everything is placed. And then you can see that there are some atrium spaces in the middle. And this is the garden we actually were able to produce because we could, have these 2 floors. And so most of the spaces in the ground floor are session rooms, and also counseling rooms, daycare center for children, and toilets and kitchen and shower facilities for women. And on the upper floor, it's basically a space where women come together and kind of spend time together. So this is from the camp, one of the roads that leading to the community center. And this is the men's space where, it's a small area where men can also come and learn different skills and also have different kind of sessions about violence, human rights, refugee rights, and all of that. And the upper floor is here, you can see, is a space which is entirely for the women to come and occupy and be themselves. So they call this House of Peace or Shantikana. They really enjoy this space and kind of finds it a space where it's almost like a refuge for them in a situation where it's so dense. And so, so some of these projects are there. So we built about 2 of these houses inside the camp, and we built 2 outside the camp for the host community or the Bangladeshis. As you can see here, the first act of our programming where the women, and these women are actually local Bangladeshis who got displaced, and their livelihood turned into a challenge because of this refugee settlement, where their land was taken to make space for the refugees. And so they are now being brought under different kind of livelihood programs by UN agencies, especially World Food Program, who we work with. And so you can see that it was a process where we also tried to understand from the women, and these women are actually farmers, so they grow their own vegetables and different kind of fresh produce, which they then sell to WFP. And the World Food Program is responsible for ensuring food to the refugees. So they buy this fresh produce from these local women farmers and actually gives it to the refugees. And so it's a nice system where women are also being able to generate income for their families. So again, for them, we created 2 aggregation centers. And so this is one of the aggregation center outside the camp in a place called Teknaf. And again, using bamboo as a material because they don't have land ownership. And so the idea is that, if needed, they could take it down and move it to a different location. We have a brick plinth on which these bamboo and the steel connectors are sitting. There are 2 levels. The lower level is where women generally bring in their fresh produce and sell to the local farmers and also local people, but also to the World Food Program. And so you see here in the lower level, it's a full-scale bazaar where all the fresh produce are brought in and people come and buy that. And on the upper level is where women generally get together discussing their own work and their own daily life's tale, I guess. So these are some of the works that we've been doing. Just very quickly, I would, since we are talking about cities, maybe a bit of a glimpse of Dhaka. And it's a city which is growing fast. It was one of the fastest growing cities in the world. We have about 20 million people living in the city of Dhaka. And it's one of the densest cities, which we have about population, as you can see, all the data written down. It's dense. But I would like to go towards the periphery. And in the periphery of the city of Dhaka is actually where it's an unplanned growth, as you can see here, narrow alleyways. The city grew by itself without any proper planning. And this is the southern part of Dhaka, right next to the river Buriganga. And this is a Mughal fort. And around the Mughal fort, the city has grown all around. So it's from the Mughal times or pre-Mughal times, and then slowly during the British colonial time, and even now. So basically a very dense neighborhood. But what I like about this image is that this fort in the middle kind of gives this order in this enormous amount of chaos that you can see around. And 2 projects I probably just show very quickly. There's one community center we designed towards the south, and you can see the river here, the Buriganga River in the south. Community center we built in a location called Jinjira, a very dense neighborhood. And the other one is the mosque that we designed to the north, again on a river side, which is Turag River. And right next to it, we built this mosque, the Baitur Rauf Mosque. And so basically two locations. One is the blue one on the top in the north, right next to the river Turag, and the other one is on the other side of the Buriganga River, where you can see in the red dot, the community center. So the community center is basically a space where it's sort of cultural space where people come. There's library, spaces to see film, a small cafe, things like that. So it's just a very basic building, which actually, in a way, have this atrium space in the middle where people can come and gather. And it's a very basic plan with a structure, the services at the back, and 2 buildings on 2 sides and the central atrium in the middle. So I will not go very detailed into this building, just to show you some images of it. I'd rather talk about the mosque, which I know people like to listen to, and also it has some community aspect to it. And this is my grandmother who actually commissioned me for this project. And this is the image that shows the first event where she, as you can see her, sitting next to the haystack in white sari. This was the event when in 2006, September, she declared that this area will be, or this site will be given or donated for mosque. So she owned the land, and she donated this land for the mosque. And she basically gave me the responsibility of designing it. And if you look at the image here, you see that it's still a very village-like atmosphere. It used to be a very agrarian landscape. But over time, it has changed and transformed as the city is growing fast. So my first act was to find out what is a mosque, in many ways, to go back to the very beginning and question what is a mosque. And if you look into the history of Islam, you'll see that the mosque form was actually taken from the house form. The construction system was similar as a house form, just elongated to give space for congregation. And the use or the function of a mosque was not only for prayer, but also for many other different reasons. It was a space for gathering, for congregation, where people would gather to learn about the values of Islam, and also at the same time, it was a space for judicial action, diplomacy, advocacy. It was a space for all different things that can happen, communal, social actions. And so over the years, as Islam flourished from that time on towards the East and the West, the mosque actually took different forms. And as it went to different locations, it adapted to the local culture, the local construction technique, the local climate. And so we see different forms of mosque all around the world. And in our own location in Bangladesh, Islam came in the 13th century, 14th century, during the Sultanate period. And so in those days, this is the kind of mosques that we see. And these are the most authentic mosque forms from that time on. But nowadays, we see a completely different kind of mosque culture that goes on. So my idea was, how can I reconnect to these very basic and old mosque form, but at the same time, make it about the space or the spirituality of the space, rather than a building which is about symbolic attributes such as domes and minarets, but a space which can be used for many other functions as it was meant in the earlier days. And so spiritual connectivity became a major element of the design. And so light and so these two spaces for me are really inspirational in terms of light. And so the site, as you can see here, that's the river, and the mosque actually sits it's a 75 feet by 75 feet space, and the prayer hall makes a direction which is about creating a degree with the Mecca. And so in a way, we had to address that. And here you can see how this entire area was slowly becoming much more dense settlements, and that is something I had to also address. So yeah, so this image shows actually how the mosque, wherever you are, it's actually focusing on this main aspect of Mecca. So everybody around the world is directed towards Mecca when they pray. And so in that sense, my prayer hall, the mosque's prayer hall, had to be shifted towards the direction of Mecca. And that meant that the site and the prayer hall had a sort of an angular relationship. And so I introduced this drum in the middle, which actually helped to facilitate this movement. And at the same time, looking back into the past and finding these inspirational spaces, which are kind of load-bearing brick structures, brick being our only material in the Delta. We don't have any other material other than mud. And to bake that and turn into brick has been our only way of permanence, act of permanence. So the idea was to build the entire structure with brick, load-bearing brick structure, and only the prayer hall in the middle, which is tilted, as you can see, is the only concrete structure. And that was also because my grandmother did give the land, and she did give me some money in the beginning as a fund to start the construction. But in the same year, as I showed you, in 2006, in December, she passed away. And after that, I had to generate the fund. And it was actually from the community, from friends, from family, that the fund was gathered. And I had about 150,000 US dollars to build this project. And so this is the mosque. You can see how the city is expanding and growing around it. It's constantly growing. So at one point, this mosque will not be visible from anywhere. So the idea of making a facade or grandeur wasn't an important one, but it was about creating a space which is within, and a space where people can find refuge in many ways. And the small spaces that we've created on the sides, these steps and the plinth, becomes a very active space for people to gather during prayer or even after, throughout the day. This is a space probably will be the only space left once all the sites are built up with apartment buildings. And so that's how the whole project is. It's a very basic elemental project where we have brick work, load-bearing brickwork. We have light coming through into the spaces. And as you enter, it's a very sort of a spiritual space in terms of light. And light is the only adornment of this space. And the rest of it is just very elemental, very basic in its own existence. There is no embellishment otherwise. The building kind of works very interestingly with light, the sun angle, and so basically throughout the year it has very different ways and moods that's generated. So so some images here, and I hear something at the background. And we get vendors, so you'll hear a few vendors too. So basically this is the last project that I wanted to share. Right after the Aga Khan Award, we had an event where we used the space as a place for everyone to come together and celebrate. So the community came together, and this was a lunch we organized in that same space. And so there are marriage happening in that space. There's so many different ways people come and use it as a refuge. And so that's with this project, I end my talk. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.